On July the 14th, 2014, representatives from the United States, the UK, France, Germany, Britain, Russia, and China stood together with Iran's foreign minister, telling the world they'd struck an historic deal that would end Tehran's economic exclusion and its nuclear ambitions.
As Iran has fulfilled its commitments, today, multilateral and national economic and financial sanctions related to Iran's nuclear program are lifted in accordance with the JCPOA.
The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action set limits for uranium enrichment and allowed international inspectors access to Tehran's nuclear facilities. In return, the EU, the US, and the United Nations agreed to lift economic sanctions. But Tehran complained other countries weren't moving fast enough on their commitments, and foreign companies remained hesitant of doing business with Iran. A year and a half after the deal was signed, Washington began to ease the economic chokehold on Tehran.
We have no objection, and we do not stand in the way of foreign banks engaging with Iranian banks and companies, obviously as long as those banks or companies are not on our sanctions list for non-nuclear reasons.
As European countries resumed purchases, Tehran's oil exports jumped from less than 1 million barrels per day in 2016 to more than 2 million barrels in 2017. Trade with the EU increased 56% to $25 billion in that year, and several companies announced plans to invest in Iran. But just as the economy seemed to be recovering, Washington ditched the nuclear deal, accusing Iran of misleading the international community and destabilizing the region.
We have terminated a terrible, terrible deal that should have never, ever been made. And we will be putting on among the strongest sanctions that we've ever put on a country.
The US sanctions that followed have all but stopped the flow of Iranian oil exports. Many international companies have shelved investment plans, and the Iranian currency has lost more than 60%. Tehran's responded by resuming uranium enrichment and threatening maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz.
The Iran nuclear deal is a model for the victory of peace and diplomacy over war and unilateralism. It is Iran's preferred option, but it has never been and is not Iran's only option.
Iranian officials say they're willing to negotiate if US sanctions are lifted. European leaders say there's still time to salvage the agreement.
Iran is still a good year away from developing a nuclear weapon. We think there is still some closing but small window to keep the deal alive, and that's what I'm here to talk about.
None of the parties to the agreement has signaled their intention to invoke this article, which means that none of them is for the moment, for the time being, with the current data we have had, in particular from the IAEA, that the non-compliance is considered to be a significant non-compliance.
Despite the EU, Japan, and other countries' attempts to resume talks, so far Washington and Tehran don't see eye to eye, and Iran's economy continues to plummet. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with Babak Emamian, who joins us live now from London. He's a financial advisor and the chairman and founder of the British Iranian Business Association. Welcome to Money Talks, Babak. Before we look at the current state of play, let's rewind to when the deal was signed 4 years ago. We saw thousands of Iranians take to the streets celebrating when the deal was signed. Can you tell us more about what impact the deal had on the Iranian economy?
Yes. The reason why people were celebrating is because majority of the Iranian industries are loss-making operations. They're not profitable because for the last 40 years, there has been a massive mismanagement of economy. So unless the production of manufacturing or even the service sector, they're not subsidized by all revenue, most of them tomorrow they would go bankrupt. And that's one of the reasons why people were celebrating, because by having this deal signed, it would allow Iran selling oil, then you would have hard currency, and the hard currency then could be spent on subsidizing these loss-making operations.
Okay, now, in your view, did ordinary Iranians feel the impact of the rolling back of these sanctions, i.e., did Iranians get more money as a result?
Well, if you look at it, 70% of Iranian economy is run by the government or revolutionary guards. So in 70%, that's a huge chunk of 2/3 of the population or economy depend on government, whether it's steel production, petrochemical, oil and gas industry, or defense industry. A lot of people forget that Iran has a huge defense industry. So these operations, again, as I've been saying, these are not profitable because they were not based on real economic models. And even they know this in Iran. Everybody knows about it, bad mismanagement. The only thing the government for the last 40 years has been trying to control was the currency. By this way, they were trying to control the inflation, but not actually the growth in the economy or the profitability of operations. That's why Iran, a lot of people think the only way Iran industries can be profitable or can become efficient is by having joint venture with European or American companies, where then the auditing of them is done properly, because there is lots of corruptions. And Iranians are not capable of auditing themselves because of, network of business people or influences by different groups. So the only way you could get rid of corruption in Iranian industry is by having joint venture with foreign companies, where then they'll be audited in stock markets in UK or Germany or United States.
Okay, interesting. Now, as we heard, soon after Donald Trump came to power in the US, he pulled the country out of the nuclear deal. He says that the money that was returning to the Iranian economy was being used to fund conflicts in places like Syria and Yemen. Do you agree with that point of view?
I agree. The money was spent on the defense industry. Well, whether it went to the wars in Yemen, Syria, Iraq, or Lebanon, or wherever, it was mainly spent on defense industry, because Iran, as I mentioned, for the last 40 years has built a huge defense industry.
Now, tell us more about how crippling that the US withdrawal from the agreement has been for the Iranian economy. How has it hurt the Iranian economy?
First of all, there has been a 400% depreciation of the currency. So you just translate that into increases in the prices. It's the hyperinflation. So then this hyperinflation making everything expensive. So nobody could buy items, or if they buy it, they have to reduce their consumption by something like 60%. And this would have a effect on the economy as a whole. When the demand is low, so the production will become low. The only thing I can say that has helped any sector would be the agricultural sector and those small manufacturing units that are not dependent on foreign parts, equipment from foreigners, or they require foreign currency to operate. So there has been a blossom for those small, I'm saying small manufacturing businesses, and also some sectors in agriculture. The rest of them, which are usually large industries or large businesses, again, I mentioned petrochemical, oil and gas, steel productions, defense sector, and so on. So they are owned by government. So the government is losing money. And the only way that now they see the go-ahead is just printing more money. So that would lead to more inflation. That's why they are desperate to come to some resolution and having oil revenue coming back to the economy.
Now, Babak, before we let you go, I'd like to ask, do you believe that this deal can be saved? We heard EU leaders believe there's still a sliver of hope. Do you agree with them?
I don't, because I see within a 10 days' time, less than a 10 days' time, we'll have a new Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson. And for his political survival, he has to become double Trump in order to attract the right-wing politics of UK. So today, Jeremy Hunt, the current foreign secretary, is saying that can be saved. That's a political maneuvering for his own leadership election in UK. But I believe there will be most probably a new foreign secretary. And Boris Johnson, if even he keeps Jeremy Hunt as the foreign secretary, Boris Johnson's style is about nationalism, jingoism. So he would want to use this to actually punish Iran and be harder on Iran and double what Donald Trump would outdo Trump. Yeah. Let's do it this way. So I don't see this still being saved.
Okay, Babak Emamian, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time from London.